Hi, I'm Felippe Silveira, co-founder of MOWE Studio, and here's how to approach pre-production in a strategic way. So many of the answers to the previous questions, they come from the pre-production stages. And they are like different approaches can help to predict how much you're gonna spend and also shape the production to be more optimized. So when you talk about like pre-production impacting on costs, sometimes it's called as well as discovery. The pre-production phase is key for studios and agencies that strategically think and they affect the production and help to prevent unnecessary expenses. But of course as well, not only thinking about expenses, but foreseeing opportunities. And to make it easy to understand, like this is a bird's eye view of how we separate those two stages. So on pre-production, we talk about like a strategy, script writing, style, storyboarding. And on production side, we have illustration, animation, and sound design. When you put out the work on, make sure the whole pre-production is well prepared and well defined. We already know like where we're going. We already know like how this is gonna better impact our goal before we go to production. Is gonna be much more cost effective. And when you talk about like work on this pre-production stage, it's sometimes hard to define like who should be in charge of this. What we see is that like when it comes to handling strategy, it can happen in many ways. It can be the advertising marketing agency working on pre-production, the animation studio alone, or a hybrid between both. So of course the first one are those cases where the agency is gonna prepare everything from a script to storyboard, the style guidelines, and so on, and take this to animation studio to produce. Works fine if you are an agency who have a director or a strategist who is skilled enough, experienced enough in animation to understand all the nuance and all directions it can go. On the other ends, there are moments where the animation studio take in and develop the whole pre-production as well. But one thing is, usually working with agencies, animation studio don't have direct access to clients, which can be bad when you think about like how can we develop a strategy without all the information and knowledge that the agencies has around the clients and where they are taking this. So usually the hybrid mode is what is more recommended, that it works right like this way. Like the agency started drafting, let's say drafting scripts, setting up some initial mood boards, or not even that, but working together with the animation studio to take what they are doing like for all the other parts of the campaign, but bring the animation studio to help shape the strategy towards the animation expertise. It's like how can get the most in animation from this standpoint of starting point of the strategy for the whole campaign. And this has been like things that we saw working best. And of course, when you talk about this and affecting on pricing, the more time you spend in pre-production, the less time you need during production. So any change you need to make early in the game results in less headache later on. And if something is not very clear and ready to move forward during the early stages, don't think the animation will solve it every time. There are moments where animation can solve a problem. So let's say, oh no, this is not so clear, but during the animation I'm gonna solve it. But usually it can bring more and more problems. But one of the big things about this is like during the pre-production, the number of professionals, even though they are usually directors and strategists, they're like a really high skill, high level, they're much lower than during production time. So production time, you have like exponentially amount of professionals in comparison to pre-production, which is much more costly. And at the same time, the more time you need to spend there with more professionals for a long time, this is going to impact directly on a budget. So the more work you can put in pre-production, more efficient it will be for you to foresee and predict what's going on later on when it takes this to production. And when you think about like when is the best time to work on this, so the best time to start is as soon as possible. The sooner you start pre-production, more predictable can be your animation. Also gives you time to strategy to play their cards and visualize some creative opportunities that can take advantage of a single project. Let's say turn it into a series instead of a one-time thing, and set the terrain for success. Check the entire webinar in the link in the description.